When the boat carrying women's rights starts to take on water, are the passengers going to row or wade? One of the people making my stupid joke no longer a joke possesses interesting Chinese four pillars. Clarence Thomas was born on June 23, 1948 at 9 p.m. at Pinpoint, Georgia. Birth information is from birth certificate, courtesy of astrologer Francis McAvoy. Incidentally, Roe v. Wade was overturned the day after his birthday on June 24, 2022, and the Supreme Court erased the line between church and state 2 days before his birthday on June 21st. Just to be forthright and state the obvious, when it comes to Mr. Thomas, I'm more liberal than I'm conservative. I shall try to maintain some manner of objectivity when reading his birth chart. The following will be a quote from the Oyez Project at the Illinois Institute of Technology's Chicago-Kent College of Law. This is an online multimedia archive of the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court itself regards as an authentic, though unofficial, online source to access the court's information. I quote, Clarence Thomas is known for his quiet, stoic demeanor during oral arguments and his conservative viewpoint that challenges, if not surpasses, even Justice Scalia's originalism. Thomas is notorious for his lack of questions during oral arguments. While many justices use questions to show their opinion on an issue or communicate with the other justices as to their feelings on a case, Thomas remains silent, but that does not hinder the other justices from discerning his thoughts. His reputation of conservatism guides their predictions. He has shown his opinions to lean farther right than any other justice on the bench today. Though Thomas is known for his lack of engagement in the oral arguments, his intellect is indispensable to his conservative cohorts. End quote. Clarence Thomas has the following four pillars. His year is Yang Earth Rat. His month is Yin Earth Sheep. His all-important day is Yang Metal Dragon. His hour is Yang Fire Dog. Are his four pillars weak or strong? Strong. Very strong. They aren't perfectly strong, but nothing is. It's just like it's impossible to have the entire universe bathed in light with no shadow or darkness. In fact, his chart is strong enough that it's instructive to compare it down the line with another very strong chart, Donald Trump, because they share certain strengths along with specific weaknesses. How are his pillars strong? Each part of his four pillars chart, there are 8 pieces total, are composed of at least one of the 5 elements: water, wood, fire, earth, or metal. Other videos of mine have covered how some elements feed into others and how some elements check or destroy others. Suffice it to say, Clarence Thomas's Daymaster is Yang metal. The rest of his chart has 5 pieces of earth to feed that metal. That's uncommonly strong. Each of those 5 pieces of earth give him a tool for harmony, balance, and centering, which is the ideal fuel for order, logic, and justice, all of which help someone whose profession is the law. However, if his 4 pillars are elementally strong, he still has 2 Achilles heels. His Yang Fire Hour Heavenly Stem checks and destroys his Yang Metal Daymaster. His Dragon Day, the way he sees himself, and his Dog Hour, the way he relates when he's asserting authority, are in direct conflict. If Clarence Thomas is a Yang Metal Daymaster, the last thing he wants to weigh in is literally his opinion. Judgment, yes. Opinion, no. As a Yang Metal Daymaster with a Yang Fire Hour stem, someone whose aspirations are in direct conflict with and have direct leverage over the way he sees himself, he does not want his opinions to count in his arguments. His behavior is how he makes his analysis count as front and center. In this regard, Thomas is like Queen Elizabeth II, who has the elemental talent to talk, but almost no desire to do so. Originally, Thomas wanted to be a priest, and successfully aimed his education in that direction. The Catholic Church at the time, taking a neutral stance towards civil rights, helped make Clarence Thomas abandon the priesthood shortly after the assassination of Martin Luther King. As a preacher on the pulpit, the views he would have freely given voice to would not be up for cross-examination, as is the case with the law. He would have been able, as a priest, to give free rein to both his analytical Metal Daymaster and his expressive Hour stem. In his youth, admittedly under pressure from student loan debt, Thomas was addicted to alcohol. Fortunately, he quit and moved his life forward. However, something in the four pillars should speak to the mental or emotional turmoil to make him want to drink in the first place. His day dragon and hour dog fierce internal conflict are certainly enough to do that. But why alcohol? As alcohol is formed by fermentation, the macrobiotics peoples regard alcohol as an extremely yin, overly refined, and therefore toxic dietary source of the element wood, especially as it acts as a stimulant on the primary wood organ in the body, the liver. For a young Metal Daymaster, having wood means the ability to assert authority without having to fight. That authority comes naturally and effortlessly. There's a fraction of wood in his sheep month, and an essentially equally small fraction of wood in his dragon day. But mostly Mr. Thomas has no place where he can simply assert himself and have people do what he wants without fuss. Just as a metal person with wood in their pillars can assert their will on people naturally, an earth person with water, the element that earth dominates, can assert their will as well. Both Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump have very elementally strong four pillars. But while Mr. Trump certainly can make his base follow him, he can't order someone to do what he wants and have them do his bidding. Trump, a yin earth daymaster, has no water in his pillars at all. If he did have some, he might have been able to compel Mike Pence to disrupt the proceedings on January 6, 2021. Likewise, while Clarence Thomas does have the inner strength to overcome adversity and come out on top, to a lesser extent than Donald Trump, he also can't order or compel people to do what he wants either. He has to convince them. And this lack in his pillars does constitute a sort of emotional injury. This is part of why he doesn't weigh in with questions during oral arguments. He knows that nothing he says during those oral arguments is going to sway his fellow justices. He has engineered ways to influence the other justices without having to open his mouth. This is a consequence of being a young Metal Daymaster with virtually no wood in the chart. This is why, given his understandable internal stress, Thomas took to alcohol to give him some wood energy. As Thomas has the dragon-dog internal conflict, it's not just that principle and tradition are the only emotional issues with the man. As dragon and dog are enemies, the issues of principle versus tradition are at war inside of him. And tradition, which is another way of saying precedent, is what wins the battle for Clarence Thomas every time. He refers backwards to precedent rather than extrapolating forward with principle. Thomas benefited from affirmative action when he was young. He grew to hate it because as a hard-working and intelligent person with an elementally strong four pillars, affirmative action gave opponents lazier and less intelligent than he the lame excuse that he didn't earn his place. I believe he saw affirmative action not as a boon to him, but as a smokescreen that denied his essential worth to the world. In a real sense, Clarence Thomas now votes against measures like affirmative action because it aims forward to a world other people think should exist rather than aiming backward to essential worth, which he thinks is far more important. If the world is rational, Thomas and his conservative colleagues will argue his essential worth would be recognized regardless of race. Affirmative action takes essential worth and trashes it to make room at the top for the inferior, because if any criterion other than merit is used to place people in society, then people lacking merit will end up in places they don't belong. However, we have the opposite, equally valid argument that the status quo, by gatekeeping the definitions of merit, is just as effective at screening out merit and worth and keeps in power the inferior people the status quo wants to keep there. How have we gotten here? As one with Dragon Day and Dog Hour, Clarence Thomas ultimately puts tradition before principle. As his Yang metal daymaster is very well supported, this argues further for someone who has the logical powers to argue whatever position he takes, whether on principle or on tradition. A neutral position of justice can argue that following tradition or precedent is what should be done sometimes, and following principle and innovation should be followed at other times. The dragon believes that if you define your principles and stick to them, they will guide you through life. The dog believes that you shouldn't let rules or principles trap you. Judge each situation fresh. Consequently, dogs believe in tradition because tradition becomes a tradition by being proven correct time after time. One who adheres to tradition will naturally prefer to choose the conservative route. They believe that adhering to the past, adhering to precedent, is a true and vital wisdom. They will tend not to follow the principle of the law and innovate to cover situations brand new to society, thinking such actions to be a mistake. Also, while the possessor of an elementally strong chart might consider people in the world to be unfair, they regard the world itself as a place where they ultimately feel at home. By contrast, the possessor of an elementally weak chart learns they have to work on themselves first before they can take on the world's challenges, before they can stand to live in the world as it is. As we have someone here with an elementally very strong chart, and one whose very harsh emotional internal conflict makes them choose tradition over principle and innovation, we can see why Clarence Thomas is regarded as the most far-right member of the Supreme Court. To some extent, we have found out what makes Clarence Thomas tick.